Welcome into the Intangibles, fellow Arrowhead Addicts. My name is Price Carter, and we are just a mere 24 hours away from Chiefs playoff football. And joining me today, as always, is Christian Ainsworth, my co-host. Christian, it's getting so close to the Chiefs defending the three-peat, or I guess I should say attempting the three-peat, defending the two-peat. How are you feeling 24 hours out?
Honestly, pretty good. This is it's almost like a little scary how not concerned I am about this first playoff game, which gives me like early Chiefs fandom vibes where it's like, oh my God, yeah, whatever I think we're going to do, it's going to be the exact opposite. Like in my brain is telling me like, oh, it's a blowout. This is the matchup you talked about wanting in the last podcast. This is the matchup I think Chiefs fans were probably wanting in general. It's going to be a one-score game. Like it just has to be at this point.
Well, I mean, it feels like that's really the only type of game the Chiefs play, right? Is a one-score game. I do think, like, I understand what you mean, that there is still a pinch yourself, is this reality? Like the team has this huge advantage as far as experience. They are the inevitable team. It still just feels surreal, especially with the Texans where, I remember in 2015, the big Nile Davis touchdown return to open that game off. I mean, at that point, the Royals were the team in town that were like having success, not the Chiefs. So breaking that playoff win curse, I should say, was huge. It's one of those things that there's guarded optimism, but it does feel like there's just a certain energy about the team that maybe, just maybe, they were kind of sleepwalking through the season. I know that's not really possible because, I mean, they went 15-1. You can't win NFL games and sleepwalk. But I do think that there is a certain intensity here, especially like I think there's something to getting guys in the building who are still hungry, like DeAndre Hopkins, like Hollywood Brown. I think Kareem Hunt's very hungry. I think all those guys, like there's a little bit extra motivation for those guys. And then obviously kind of the historic element of it too is it's super exciting. But we've got an exciting show for you today too. We're going to be talking a little bit about some of the opponents that the Chiefs might face, just kind of talking about the playoff picture in general. We're also going to be talking about a surprise playoff hero. Every year, the Chiefs kind of have these guys who pop up. We're going to try to pinpoint who we think that player might be. And then we're going to break down this game in kind of a unique way where we're ranking the players on each team and see who has the most top 10 players and who doesn't. Real quick, though, let's talk about the rest of the playoff field. So this is, to me, the best football weekend of the year. Last weekend, there's a lot of football on. We also had the college football playoff, which didn't disappoint. But this is the good football. Like, it's pretty rare that you just have, like, bad divisional matchups. Usually these games are close. There's good teams. Last week was kind of minus one game, like, leading lambs to slaughter. Which of these games, when I say these games, I should specify that are starting tomorrow. We're talking about... let's see, Lions and Commanders, Rams, Eagles, Ravens, Bills. Which of these are you the most excited to watch?
Honestly, Lions, Commanders. And that might be a little much for some people, like maybe trying to get some shock value. But dude, I just see this as a game that like it's going to come down to the wire. The Lions are already banged up, already injured. The Commanders are riding this high of like, oh my God, we made it to the playoffs and won a game. And I think there really could be an upset there. Like if you're looking at, but it could go either way. Like it could be Commanders win by 3 or Lions win by 30. If you're going for like the best watch, definitely Ravens Bills, right?
My opinion about this is I'm going to be totally decided on how I feel about this game depending on the outcome of the Chiefs game. Like if somehow the Chiefs do not win, I'm not going to want to watch that game at all because like those teams are going to be even more incentivized because they know that this is the AFC Championship game because the Texans are waiting on the other side, which let's be clear, the Texans are a good team and we're going to talk about them, but it's not the Chiefs and it's not Arrowhead, right? Like if the Bills were to win, they'd host the AFC Championship game. If the Ravens were to win, they'd host the AFC Championship game. There'd just be a lot more on the line. I'm not sure I could watch. So, but if the Chiefs do win, yes, that is the game for sure. Just two absolute heavyweight team going at it. I want it to somehow go into like fifth overtime, the longest NFL game in history, and it to just be like 58-59. Just an absolute bloodbath. And then the Chiefs can just like pop popcorn and watch the game from home. Like that'd be ideal. But either way, I mean, there's just so many great players on those teams, man. And it's pretty rare that you have like the number 1 and number 2 MVP guys lining up against each other in the playoffs like this. It's kind of crazy to think that like this game ultimately won't decide who gets MVP, but it probably should, honestly, but I'm not sure. Yeah, there's a lot of really good games. Real quick though, I think this is kind of an interesting question. Who would you rather win that game? So let's say hypothetically the Chiefs do win. Who would you rather see win that game and come to Arrowhead, the Bills or the Ravens?
I know we should probably say the Bills just because I think the Ravens are a more complete team, but like mental edge, I'm taking the Ravens. Like Patrick Mahomes has had no problem with Lamar Jackson at any point of the career or either point of either of their careers. He's played well against them every single time. The Bills always seems like a dogfight, man. It's like, man, I'd love to beat the best teams. I'd love to, give that Travis Kelce speech where we'll fight you in a Walmart parking lot. But like, dude, I'm kind of just in it for the championships, man. Like,
yeah,
I would just love to see one easy championship for the Chiefs.
Such a weird thing. I said something about this like this weekend. And I was like, hey, I know we'd all like to see the Broncos win or the Steelers to upset the two teams, but I really think you want those two teams playing each other for the best advantage. And like half of the replies to this tweet were just people like, oh, I love the Chiefs so much, and you're wrong. Like, I don't doubt. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, if there's a way that they can line up the Panthers, the Browns, and the Patriots and just like play the top four picks in the playoffs, I'm all for it, right? Like, they all count the same. So yeah, I'm absolutely here for the easiest path possible, especially whenever like at this point we're just talking about gravy. We're just talking about like history here. We've pretty much secured like, hey, the legacies of Reed, Mahomes, Kelce, those type of guys. So now it's just like stacking rings, right? I'm not sure. I think that there's some unique things about both teams. Ultimately, I come down to this. I think if both of these teams have had the burden of not being able to beat the Chiefs, ultimately the Ravens have been slapped around more by the Chiefs. The only game that the Ravens have beat the Chiefs was Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumbling in the red zone when the Chiefs were just basically trying to ice the game and kick a game-winning kick. That's what it took for them to win. And then like Patrick Mahomes is like 5-1 against Lamar Jackson otherwise. So meanwhile, the Bills have come into Arrowhead and won several times, just not when it mattered most. I think with the 13 seconds game, with that sort of thing, and I know we're kind of like really getting into the minutia of like the mental side of the game. Personally, I think that the Bills probably believe that they can come in here and do this. Whereas the Ravens, I'm just not sure they can. And I think Derrick Henry is the type of runner that the Chiefs do better against because like they're one of those teams that they're going to get hands on you pretty quickly. The faster, shiftier guys, those are the ones that worry. Obviously, Henry is still very fast somehow at the size he is, but he's got to have a runway to get going, right? So I'm going to lean towards Ravens here, but I think both are just really good, well-coached teams. And, Josh Allen just also has this ability, one play a game where it's like, oh my God, how did he make that throw? And Lamar Jackson makes those plays too, but it's the having to cover every second from whistle to whistle of a play. There was a play with Ty Johnson in the Broncos game where it's like, it looks like Josh Allen's about to step out of bounds and instead he uncorks this throw across the field to the end zone to a running back of all people and he makes the catch. It's just stupid.
Oh, yeah. Well, and also, like, I know Lamar is a better runner of the football in general throughout a game, right? It's like, but there are times that we're playing the Bills or you watch the Bills play anybody, and it's like 3rd and 8 from the goal line. And it's like, I know who's getting the ball. The defense knows who's getting the ball. It's Josh Allen, and you can't do anything about it. And he's just going to run head first in the end zone.
Something else that's so frustrating about these teams now, too, is like there for a while during the Eagles Super Bowl in 2022, 2023, the Chiefs, like the Eagles were the team that ran the tush push. Every team runs that stuff now. Like the Bills are a better quarterback than Jaylen Hurts. And by the way, they're just about as successful at the tush push. I'm being honest with you. Every team in the playoffs runs it. They run it with Marcus Mariota in Washington. They run it with Mark Andrews in Baltimore. Every team runs it besides the Chiefs. And it's honestly infuriating that the Chiefs do not do it. I can't tell you if I've ever seen it blown up. Because especially the teams like the Eagles, if it's 3rd and 1, they'll run it. And if they don't get it, or 3rd and 2, even if they don't get it, they'll run it again. And they're always going to get it. The Bills are just about as effective as it. So basically you're in a scenario where if it's 3rd and 3 or something like that, you're already done. Because like, okay, well, they just need like 2 chances at this with a tush push or a run. It's a life hack, and the Chiefs are like, what if we ran out of shotgun here? How about that? How about
without a quarterback or without a running back in the backfield too? It's let's telegraph exactly what we're going to do and see if we can do it.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I continue to think they need to do something about that. They actually did it one time. I think it was against the Eagles last year in the regular season. They ran a fake field goal where they like lined up like a field goal, and then I think it was Harrison Butker or Blake Bell or someone, like they run up under center and they tried the tush push there, and it didn't work. But it's also like, well, yeah, it's your field goal unit. It's probably not quite the same. But yes, the tush push, it's something that scares me about both those teams too, is that they can do it. But I'm going to lean towards wanting to see the Ravens, just because ultimately I think Lamar Jackson's the better passer. Josh Allen's the better passer. So, but real quick, like while we talk about this football weekend and how good it is, let's talk about Underdog. Like I said, this is one of the best football weekends of the year. Right now, you can get a free pick of Patrick Mahomes higher or lower than just half a passing yard. Real quick, here's where Patrick Mahomes ranks in his career in the divisional round. He's 6-0. That ranks first. He has a 70.4 completion percentage. That's first. His passing touchdown to interception ratio, 13-0. That's first. Total touchdown to giveaways, 16-0. He's not turned the ball over once in the divisional round and has a 115.8 passer rating. That sounds like a guy that I would like to put a little juice on the Underdog app. You be the judge on Underdog. Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on your 2 or more players' stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. Download the app today and use our code Arrowhead Addict, that's all one word, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Again, that's code Arrowhead Addict, one word, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Every player, every score, just select higher or lower on Underdog. Must be 18 years or older and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit www.mpcgambling.org. Arizona, call the 1-800-NEXT-UP or text NEXT UP to 53342, or New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. So we talked about it. We alluded to it a little bit. This is Chiefs playoffs time, which means just some weird shit is going to happen, right? Like we've seen it all. We've seen the comebacks. We've seen the weird overtime rules that no one really understood, or like I still laugh at people who were like yelling at their TVs because the Chiefs were going to let the clock burn out in overtime of the Super Bowl, when they realized like, hey, this is just the first quarter of overtime and we're going to play until we sort this out, type of thing. But there's always just some surprise people that pop up in these Chiefs playoffs runs. You've got like Dan Sorensen, right? He has this huge tackle on special teams of Justin Reed, by the way, on the fake punt that they run when the Chiefs are trying to make this 24-0 comeback. And he has this huge fumble. I can't remember the player, but he fumbled the ball at the back of the end zone against the Browns. Damian Williams Super Bowl, where honestly, he could have been Super Bowl MVP. He was incredible in that game. You have MVS legacy game in the AFC Championship game where the Bengals are on the sideline calling him the next Tyreek Hill, which is, even more hilarious now. Leo Chanel in the Super Bowl just turning into a battering ram, and honestly, 2 really great Super Bowls back to back with the Eagles and the 49ers. Or Nick Bolton in the 2022 Super Bowl, who honestly, I still question whether that second one was a fumble or not. If he has 2 scoop and score touchdowns, he's got to be what? I don't know. As a linebacker, ever won Super Bowl MVP? Did Ray Lewis do it? Maybe, I don't know. They'd be had to be one of the first ones, because he totally would have won it if he had the other scoop and score. Oh yeah.
Oh my God. And as a Mizzou alum, banging the table for Nick Bolton again, man.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been crazy though.
Oh, it would be insane. And I know we would love for Patrick Mahomes to get every single one of them, but also, I mean, did Brady win every single Super Bowl MVP? No.
Yeah, remember Julian Edelman got one, and I think one of the running backs got one too, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not, I think people have this apprehension of saying Damian Williams should have gotten the MVP over Patrick Mahomes when he ran for 102 yards and should have had 2 touchdowns. And it's no, it's all right. Other players can be good and they can secure Mahomes' legacy also.
Well,
always going to bring that up.
I think it's different now because like then, I mean, that was the first Super Bowl the Chiefs had been to in 50 years. You didn't know when you were going to get back. So you wanted Mahomes to have that one. But now that we're talking about 3 and 4, like, yeah, like, you know, if Travis Kelce has a big game or something, I would love to see him win one. Also, I'd just like be cool to see a defender get it because they almost never do, right? And I think, you know, those are always really fun prop bets. But let's not do this, okay? Calm down, okay? We've got like lots more games, lots more anxiousness to get over. We're not sure the Chiefs are making it to the Super Bowl. We shouldn't count our chickens before there's a game to play in 24 hours against a good team. So real quick, we want to try to take a stab at who some of these like surprise heroes are going to be. I think like let's lay down some ground rules, right? Like Travis Kelce can't be a surprise hero, right? Like if these are guys who are making all pro teams or Pro Bowl rosters, even though those are kind of a joke nowadays, these got to be guys who kind of come out of the woodwork. Like Derek Nottie had one of the most important plays in the first Super Bowl that like no one will ever notice except Chiefs fans. And I'm trying to remember who the running back, I think it was Mostert, was about to hit a cutback lane, and there was just nothing but green grass in the box. And Derek Nottie makes a diving shoestring tackle and saves that from being a touchdown because there was nothing but green grass in front of him. And that play, the next play, was one of the big Frank Clark sacks on Jimmy Garoppolo. Chiefs go on to win the Super Bowl, right? Like those are the plays. So we're going to try to figure out who those guys are. So Christian, give me a name of someone who you think could be an unsung Chiefs playoff legend, hero.
I'm going with Jaylen Watson as my first pick. And I think that for a few different reasons. Like if you ask the layman, the average NFL viewer, it's like, who is Jaylen Watson? Who does he play for? They'd be like, I don't know. I've never heard the name before. It's like, oh, no. He was a late round pick for the Chiefs that has played incredibly well. And as soon as he left, like the defense kind of took a step back, like a major step back. And I think that if he comes out, this guy who a lot of people had, me included, as the third cornerback on the roster, like even below Jameson Williams, say he comes out, he is away. He's with the team at the beginning of the season. Team does well defensively. He is gone for a significant portion. Defense does worse. And he comes back and he's this incredible player on defense again. It's like, dude, how do you not look at this season and think, oh man, Jaylen Watson kind of saved the season? Like if he has a pick in the playoffs, which he's absolutely capable of doing. If you remember his first year here, that pick on Justin Herbert that went 99 yards or 102 yards to seal the game. To save the game against the Chargers.
He had a game-sealing one with Trevor Lawrence in the divisional, too.
There you go. Yeah, so he has the opportunities to make these big plays. He makes them, and he's coming back at like the perfect time for him to come back story narrative-wise. So he's my first pick. I think he could be like the guy.
Jaylen Watson's story is really interesting. Obviously, how quickly he's returned from injury. I think that's something that just the Chiefs don't get enough credit for, how quality of a job they do with these injuries and getting guys back. That's a real margins type of thing that good teams do about getting their guys healthy and healing and rehabbing them. Super underrated element of the game. Also, like, this is something that's interesting. I'm really kind of excited to see how this works out. So you already mentioned it. Like Jaylen Watson was playing as maybe a top 3 or 4 player on the defense when he got injured. So our friend Aaron Schatz over at FTN, where I work, he created the site, the metric DVOA, one of the kind of all-encompassing stats for football. Weeks 1 through 8, the Chiefs' defense on passing against the DVOA was 6. So they were 6th in DVOA in passing and 1st against the run. Then Jaylen Watson gets injured. Weeks 9 through 13, they drop all the way to 30th in DVOA against the pass and 24th in the run. Like almost objectively a bad defense. Then weeks 14 through 17, still no Jaylen Watson. They're 2nd against the pass and 13th against the run. He did not include week 18 in here because he literally wrote in the graphic, who cares? But I mean, you know, like they've managed to become a good defense without Jaylen Watson. So what does it look like when they plug him in? You know, what I just think that there's some really interesting things. I don't think that we're going to see a full capacity amount of snaps from him this week, which I think is smart, by the way, because the Texans, they're this is a fun analogy. Have you ever seen the movie Kicking and Screaming with Will Ferrell?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Quality film. You know, when they're on the soccer team and he's like, pass it to the Italians, right? The Texans are a pass it to the Italians offense. They only pass the ball to the stars and that's it, right? It's going to Nico Collins, it's going to Joe Mixon, it's going to Dalton Schultz, which I did just call Dalton Schultz a star, which feels weird. But they used to have a lot more Italians, for lack of an allegory here, of when they had Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell. But the ball's only going to Nico Collins. So work Jaylen Watson in this game. But man, I mean, with the emergence of Jaden Hicks, some of the things they've seen from Chris Roll and Wallace, I think they're getting more out of certain players on the team now. Charles Omenihu obviously being a huge part of this. This defense could be just as good or better than it was last year, which is really kind of crazy to think about where we started the season at.
Oh, yeah. And the key cog in this whole thing is Jaylen Watson coming back, which is, again, just leads to testament how good he's been playing this year. I like your pick, though. I like your first pick for this. And you mentioned him just a second ago. Who was it?
It's Jaden Hicks. And I think you hit on it with the turnovers for Jaylen Watson. Like, nothing turns playoff games more than turnovers, right? And I just look at what the Chiefs can do in the secondary now and how multiple they can be. He feels like the type of guy who is going to be able to make splash plays, supporting the run, supporting the swing passes. Like, I just feel like there could be 2 or 3 plays, especially in special teams, right? Like, he's still a key special teams contributor. Like, would you be shocked at all here that we're talking about a game-turning fumble recovery on kickoff or punt return, and it's Jaden Hicks that makes the play? Absolutely not. He's a guy whose role is just increasing more and more. One of the only guys who looked good in Week 18 against the Broncos. To me, it's just the wild card of that defensive secondary. And it's exciting to think about what he could be with Jaylen Watson back on the field, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the Chiefs love their 3 safety rotations, right? They love putting somebody inside the box, like walking Justin Reed down, replacing him with a linebacker in nickel coverage. It's like they love doing that with Jaden Hicks. Jaden Hicks can be so good, and we've seen him lay the wood. I mean, on some guys, absolutely blow him up over the middle of the field. And I don't know if he'll be like an interception magnet, like some of the other people we've had come in and play that third safety role or that free safety even sometimes. It's like, but dude, absolutely could envision him coming downhill against a run play and he just obliterates Joe Mixon in the backfield. He drops the football, he picks it up, he runs it. Like,
I mean, to me, it's that play in Pittsburgh, right? Like, George Pickens, a noted contested catch guy, wins the catch point. Hicks like knocks the ball away, steps over him, does the thumbs down, gets a penalty. Who cares? Tone setter, right? Those are the type of guys. Those are the type of things that matter in the playoffs. So yeah, I can totally see it. My next one here, this one feels legacy, right? Like, there's a story, there's a narrative here. I think he's going to get the predominant workload here. I think Kareem Hunt. Do I think that Kareem Hunt's going to be, having games like he had against the Patriots back in 2017? No, like, he just doesn't have that in him. But I do think that there could just be a few plays that he makes, whether it be in short yardage, whether it be like, hey, the Chiefs need a first down here to win the game, basically to put the game on ice. And he just stumbles forward and just, like in the passing game too. Some of these rail routes and stuff that they used last time against the Texans where they're, basically getting them in man coverage and just opening up a free lane for him. I can totally see it. And nothing would surprise me too if like he's the ace in the hole in the red zone. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we're sitting here a couple weeks into the playoffs and saying like, oh wow, Kareem Hunt's had 4 touchdowns in the past 3 weeks. Totally possible, because I think that's where he succeeds at. And it'd just be kind of crazy to think about him completing that story arc and everything. And, I do think that he's extremely motivated. This is his opportunity. We've talked about that video of him getting a DUI on the side of the interstate, crying, saying he should be winning Super Bowls. Well, now's his chance, and I don't think he's going to let it go to waste. They brought him in off the couch. He looked pretty great in that first game against the Chargers, looking fresh. He's wore down. That's another guy who I think has really benefited from 23, 24 days off. I'm interested to see what a fresh, motivated, redeeming Kareem Hunt looks like.
Yeah, I agree, man. Could you imagine? I mean, like, he is kind of the poster child on the Chiefs for like, you make a mistake you atone for that mistake in as much as you can in the NFL, and then you come back and you like reach that storybook ending. That would be so incredibly satisfying for every Chiefs fan who
and
thought he was the best running back in the league the first year he came. You know what I mean?
I think some people feel a little complicated about how to feel about him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll just say it. I'm rooting for Kareem Hunt. And it's not because he's a Chiefs player. Like, I want this to work, right? I think that he's come in. I mean, when has Kareem Hunt ever been a part of anything in Kansas City this time? Like, you don't hear about him in the locker room. You don't hear about him putting something on social media. He has come down and put his head down. I'm rooting for him. I think it could be very cool. And I'm happy for just kind of that whole, like, him redeeming himself and being close friends with Mahomes. I think it could be just a really cool story. And I think the stage is set. I think, like I said, I think that with Pacheco still kind of coming back from that injury and just hasn't quite looked like himself, I expect Kareem Hunt to be the lead back. So he's got his opportunity set.
Yeah, I agree. And I love when you talked about the red zone too. That's really where I see Kareem Hunt's like value just skyrocket, because he has that vision. He doesn't have the burst to, make those 70-yard runs like he used to, but he absolutely has the vision, especially with this interior offensive line where it's like, man, he gets 1 or 2 blocks and he makes a guy miss and it's a touchdown. And that's from the 6, 7, 8-yard line. And he doesn't have to run 60 yards and get winded. He's an old man now. Like, give him the easy stuff along the goal line. He'll get it done. Like, Kareem Hunt, absolute superstar. He'll be somebody to watch as well. My next one is going to be Hollywood Brown. And I know we said no superstars, and Hollywood has the name for a superstar, but he hasn't really shown anything here yet in Kansas City. Like, he had that one good game when he came back, and then they said, okay, we're putting you on ice for the playoffs. He comes back in, I could really see him being like the focal point of the offense. Not even necessarily just a clear, like, really nice addition, some icing on the cake, but like somebody that Mahomes is really looking for frequently. And I'm a DeAndre Hopkins fan. I absolutely love him. But I really think how this wide receiver core is shaping up is, if you're going to go on for it on 3rd down or 4th down and you got to have it, you're putting Travis Kelce and you're putting DeAndre Hopkins on the same side of the field and you're going high-low him, just beat him. You can beat them. You guys are smart enough to coordinate. You're smart enough, savvy enough route runners, and you're not going to drop the football. But I think downs 1, 2, sometimes 3, when it's not dire straits, it's like they're looking at Hollywood Brown and they're looking at Xavier Worthy. And I know he hasn't shown a whole lot, but if you're looking at a player who's like, man, I have to earn it to come back next year. They're not just going to re-sign me for nothing. I want to make some money. I want to at least get some sort of contract. Like, Hollywood Brown is as motivated as anybody to do well in the playoffs. So Hollywood Brown, go get it, man. Like, this is your time to shine too.
Yeah. And like, I think you're exactly right. This guy came here on a 1-year deal, trying to build his stock back a little bit, right? If he comes in here and has a great playoff run, that's what people are going to remember. And that could ultimately help him get a bigger deal. I think something else with him and just kind of what is his impact, 9 catches for 95 yards in 2 games that he played. He ran a route. Like, let's see here. He basically ran, quick math here, sorry, 34 routes in the 2 games they played. So he was not on the field a lot. We're going to see a full version of DeAndre Hopkins, who I think was on a snap count for a lot of reasons. 1 was the draft pick. 2 was the injury. And 3, just kind of like they didn't need all that from him, from Travis Kelce, from Hollywood Brown, from Xavier Worthy. Like, I expect to see a lot less Juju Smith-Schuster than we saw. I think Justin Watson will still get his reps because he's kind of a plug-and-play, useful guy in the running game, blocking game, and to play kind of like the backside of the formation, stretch the field, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I could totally see Hollywood Brown just being this guy that he is the straw that breaks the camel's back, and him just having some big plays down the field and everyone just be like, oh shoot, like this was a huge part of their offense that they were missing. And I mean, just for one more time, we just got to say it. They could have had all this in Rashee Rice. I don't think that they'd have DeAndre Hopkins, but I'd much rather have Rashee Rice than DeAndre Hopkins. Gosh, like thinking back to how good this offense is with what limitations the Chiefs have with the roster construction, especially on offense, like this could have been really, really special. And it just sucks that it didn't end up working out.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And the other part about Hollywood Brown and him having so many, what'd you say, 36 routes run, 9 catches on 36 snaps on the field.
Yeah, I tweeted this out. It doesn't count because he doesn't qualify. But if he was a qualified route runner, he'd be 4th in the NFL in yards per route run this season. That's how high his yards per route run are in those 2 games. So he certainly does not qualify, but it'd be kind of cool if he did.
Yeah, that would be crazy. That offense would be stacked too, man. And think if they, well, man, I don't know. We don't need to go into off-season talks yet, but bringing back DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown would be the most insane offense in Chiefs history. Just saying. Yeah. Maybe think about it.
My last guy is Tershawn Wharton. And I just think that when it comes to the defensive line, I feel like they are Chiefs Hall of Fame center Tim Grunhard has a great analogy, and he talks about defensive linemen like they're sharks, and not just because of Frank Clark the shark. It's because when there's blood in the water, they start swarming, and when they start swarming, it's really hard to beat them. And you see this in games, right? A great example of this was the last Super Bowl the Chiefs played in. The first half, the 49ers defensive linemen were swarming. They were intense. They were rushing the passer well. They knew that they could get pressure, and that's when they were motivated. But in that second half, when they started wearing down, the Chiefs started getting the better of them. That's when they start, putting their hands on their heads and gasping for air, sitting down on that knee as long as possible. All those things that kind of start the survival mode, as they used to call it when I played football. I think for our defensive line is definitely a shark swarm type of thing. Especially whenever you consider that, they're middle of the pack in sacks. They don't have a guy with double-digit sacks on the team. There's just kind of a lot of 7, 8, 4, those type of guys. And Tershawn Wharton looked really good to start this season now. And that's without Charles Omenihu. I think, maybe down the season he's not seen as much success. I think that he could be a guy that we're talking about that comes out and has 3 or 4 sacks in the playoffs. And it's simply because with Charles Omenihu, with George Kalafdis, with Chris Jones, and some of the blitz packages and stuff they do, that I think he's a guy that if he's going one-on-one, I think he can win that matchup more than he loses it. And I also think if he's going one-on-one or goes unblocked, he has the closing speed to bring the quarterback down. CJ Stroud, in the game that they played against the Chargers, he ran more in that game than he has in quite some time, but he's not a particularly big running threat. So I think if they're able to contain him in the pocket, that's going to be a huge advantage for them. And I think that pressure up the middle, we've talked about it bothering quarterbacks more than up the edge. If you can't step up, it's a big deal. And by the way, that scramble was up the middle that CJ Stroud had. So hopefully there's a Tershawn Wharton waiting with arms wide open for him. But Tershawn Wharton, Miners dig deep, Missouri S&T legend. I think we could be sitting here talking about remember that postseason run that Tershawn Wharton had that got him paid?
Oh yeah. Well, and on the greatest season of his career too. Wouldn't that be the perfect way to cap off this season for Tershawn Wharton? Clearly the best he's ever played, amazing in tough spots. That postseason run would be cement his legacy as a Missouri S&T legend, but also as nobody's going to remember this dude, but we thank you for your service type situation.
He'd be the second most famous alumni from there besides my buddy Ben, who went there.
I forgot about Ben.
Don't forget Ben. He's a cool dude.
My last one is going to be FAU, and this was a very, very kind of dark horse candidate for this. But if you remember correctly, or if I remember correctly, excuse me, and we think back to that San Francisco 49ers Super Bowl, who was it that made that not contested tackle on Christian McCaffrey to stop the run and prevent them from getting a touchdown to open up the game? It was FAU. He's absolutely got big plays in him to be, and has the ability to make those big plays, but also he's kind of been in this situation before. He hasn't been an incredibly productive player, but I think he's one of those guys that could get lost in the shuffle with an offensive line and an offensive coordinator that are prepping for guys like Chris Jones and Tershawn Wharton and Charles Omenihu. And it's hey, there's this first round pick that they drafted a few years ago. I understand he's not the best player on the defensive line, but he makes 1 or 2, 3 or 4 plays in the playoffs and you go, wow, okay. It would almost be like the Clark Hunt thing, or not Clark Hunt, you just said his name a second ago. We got him from the Seahawks. Frank Clark. Frank Clark. Yeah. It would almost be like that Frank Clark where it's did we pay too much to get Frank Clark here? Yeah. Okay. But would you have rather had anybody else in those high leverage moments than Frank Clark in the playoffs? It's like, no, he was incredible. Like, and you get back what you put in for that just from those few moments alone. I think we could look at the FAU signing or the draft and be like, hey, listen, not a spectacular first year, better second year, but, didn't really hit the highs that we thought. But as soon as the playoffs happened, man, he came alive and he beat run blocks when he was supposed to. He did all the dirty work for the defensive linemen that, not everybody is so willing to do, not necessarily on this team, but just in general, and makes a few splash plays. And you go, listen, FAU, was he probably the best player on the board at 32? No. Hey, but would you rather trade him for somebody else and put them in that situation to make those plays? Hell no.
To me, the Frank Clark signing and the Sammy Watkins signings were the signings that you make of a team who just has to get to a Super Bowl for the first time in 50 years. They're signings that, honestly, looking back at what the team has been now, I think they probably could have gone without and maybe still gotten there or won, knowing what Mahomes is and so on and so forth. But those are the type of moves. One, you got a rookie quarterback on a rookie quarterback contract that you make those moves. Sammy Watkins was an overpay, especially whenever you factor in how often he was injured. Frank Clark did not live up to that contract for the most part. But nobody cares because of what he did in the playoff runs that he was a part of. And he was great in those games. And we talk about the 2 Super Bowls runs, but I mean, he was good in the other runs too. I'm pretty sure he's the all-time sack leader in Chiefs playoff history. That's more of an opportunity thing than it is a counting stat. But I mean, there's something to that, right? There's been some really good pass rushers that played here in Kansas City, and Frank Clark's name on top of all of them is pretty wild. So let's try to break this game down another way. Yesterday, we had the OG Hour. They do a great job of doing the pregame show as well. We wanted to kind of spin this a different way for you. So we're going to draft the top 10 players in this game. I love this activity because I think it gives you some great insight into, one, who has the more stars, but maybe who has the most overall players. And then I also like to talk about kind of the next guys off the list, because ultimately I think in football especially, you can have 7 or 8 guys on the list, but if you don't have 1 and 2, it might not matter. So let's just kind of go real quick. Let's start at 10, work our way up. Who is your number 10 player? Keep in mind, we're doing the Texans and the Chiefs. So like his 10th player could be a Texan or it could be a Chief. Who's your 10th overall player?
My 10th overall is Will Anderson Jr., and he was a really, really high draft pick a few years ago. Absolutely productive defensive end, sort of edge player, super athletic, incredibly efficient. Is he as good in the run game? No, probably not, but he's a fantastic player, and he's got, 12 sacks on the season. He ranks 30th in hurries, 25th in total pressures, and he's just been a monster for him, man. Like, you look back, and I used to do these fake drafts to put up on my Twitter where I would trade all of our players to go up for one player, or all of our picks to go up for a top 5 pick in a draft. And it was very, very hard for me not to select Will Anderson Jr. anytime I did that. He was a fantastic prospect, fantastic NFL player, and he has been just incredible for him. Yeah.
I'll never forget the picture being at the draft in Kansas City in 2023, like bucket list sports activity for me. So much fun. And there was a really, really cool picture that they took, I believe the Texans did, or someone from this Texan social media team did. And if you're familiar with Kansas City, there's a skywalk between Crown Center and Union Station. And it basically looked over the crowd of everyone standing there. And they took a picture of Will Anderson and CJ Stroud side by side. And, the Texans were the team of that night going up for both of those guys. And it was just really cool to see the picture. It's cool to have a kind of a Kansas City twist to it. And yeah, I mean, still, like this team is not here without those two guys. And I actually ranked Will Anderson a little bit higher because I think he's the younger player, other than Danielle Hunter, because I kind of went back and forth on them. My number 10 is Travis Kelce. And I feel really gross saying that because it's Travis freaking Kelce, but we have to be realistic about the level of player he is here. He's certainly the best tight end in this game. And I'm also just like, you've got to give a nod to the player is and how smart he is. Nate Tice put out a great clip of, or actually, I'm not sure if it was Nate. I think it was Sam McDowell tweeting at Nate Tice, because Nate Tice kind of was looking at some of the film from the Chiefs Texans game. And then Sam McDowell pointed out this great play where basically Travis Kelce picks up a blitzer that the running back was supposed to blitz up, and because the running back is running that rail route, and as he's picking up the blitzer, Kelce points, which I love that he does this. He reads the field like a quarterback with his quarterback background. He points to Samaje Perine, who's wide open because of Kelce picking up this blitzer, and they hit him on this huge gain. And it's like he's another quarterback on the field. He's so good in those soft spots of the zone. He's still a very good route runner. He just gets open in so many great ways. And you've just got to give a credit to like the guy who has the most postseason touchdowns in NFL history, which is wild to say, receiving, I should say. But yeah, I mean, Travis Kelce, he's my 10.
Yeah, and the solid pick. I actually have him, for the record, off my list. I just think that there are so many younger players that have played up to his level or more. But the thing is that you look at those plays that don't make it on the stat sheet and you almost go, man, like as I was making this list, I was like, am I sure Travis Kelce is not a top 10 player in this team? Like, Will Anderson Jr. is great. Is he better than Travis Kelce? And I had to give the nod.
It's a question we won't be able to answer. But I mean, if we get what the version of him was last year in the playoffs, then I mean, he certainly is. But yeah, we just don't know. We hope that rest was. Did you know that Travis Kelce played the most snaps that he has since 2019 this year, and he took a game off?
Oh my God.
More snaps than 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. He played more snaps in all those years. So last time he played this many snaps was 2019. And that's in the 16-game season.
It's the desperation of the offense, man. We had to do something with all those injuries.
I think so. And also I think like he's been more of a blocker now before. So I think like there was a lot of times he was on the field, but maybe not a part of like the route scheme or something. So, all right, your number 9.
My number 9 is CJ Stroud. And there's a few different reasons for this. Fantastic player last year. Rookie last year, played maybe, I mean, there were a lot of people saying that he should be a top 5 quarterback already. And with quarterbacks, you always kind of have to sit back and wait and let all the insane takes go by you before you make a decision on whether he's a fantastic player or not. He's a great player. Do not get me wrong. But this year, there's just been something that hasn't clicked. And I think part of it is kind of he's dealing with the same type of stuff Mahomes is, only he doesn't have all that experience. He doesn't have an Andy Reid to help him out. He doesn't have a Travis Kelce on the field to help him out. And he was put in a situation where 15th in yards for a quarterback, tied for 15th in touchdowns with 20, 12 interceptions on the league or on the year. QBR averaged over the season was 50.1. That's 24th. He can be a great player and his ceiling is so high, but I think that all these injuries, again, he's just in that Mahomes situation and he's not Mahomes, and there's no problem with that. He's a fantastic player. He's just young. He's not there yet. And so I can't put him above guys like Trent McDuffie or Creed Humphrey in this game where it's like, if we're talking about the best of the best and positional value, I could, I'll take that argument, but just based off of how they play compared to the other people in their position, I can't justify it. I can't put him higher than 9th.
Damn, you gave such a solid argument for that like, I'm kind of like, would it be bad if I changed my list now? Because it kind of making me rethink it a little bit. But I mean, here's the thing that I'll say about Stroud, because I do have him much higher. I think there's a lot on his plate this year. And I think we could have seen a much, much different version of him if some of these things would have worked out this year with the offense health, with the offensive line. I also think Bobby Sloak, the offensive coordinator, is not doing him any favors, but also like he's got to be better. And they score. The Texans turned the ball over more. One of those was a fumble, or I think 2 of those were fumbles. And then a Stroud interception. Stroud had 2 interceptions in Kansas City a couple of weeks ago. They turned the ball over more than offensive touchdowns in the game against the Chargers. Like let's be clear that score was partially based off of a pick six, a blocked kick that they returned for 2 points, a lot of short fields. Justin Herbert was doing them some favors in that game. But all right, so my number 9, we've already talked about it. I've got Will Anderson. I left Danielle Hunter off the list just because I think Anderson is the younger player. I think Danielle Hunter is probably the little bit more refined player, but also this is like the first season forever that Danielle Hunter's been healthy. All year he's struggled with health. So we've overgone on Will Anderson. Dude's a stud. I think, I liked him a little bit more watching him against when I was looking at Joe Thuney tape from last week. So Anderson is my number 9. Who's your 8?
So we actually have the same number 8, and I'll let you go first if you want to with Joe Thuney.
Yeah, it depends, right? Is he a guard or a tackle? I put him at
Yeah.
8 here because I mean, he's a two-time All-Pro guard. Also, what he can do at tackle. He's the Chiefs have a definitive advantage with offensive line in this game, even when you factor in like Laramie Tunsil and the player he is at left tackle for the Texans. So we've got All-Pro guard Joe Thuney at 8.
Yeah. And one other thing, 0 sacks allowed on the season. It's the same thing with Trey Smith. It's the same thing with Creed Humphrey. Interior line has been fantastic, but also only 6 quarterback hits, which when you think of all the positions he's played on the year, he's played left tackle, he's played left guard. That's insane. That's
And
like,
if you go back and watch the Chargers game, Danico Autry was wreaking havoc on that offensive line. Like in an article that I posted today about the kind of DJ Humphreys Joe Thuney decision, I cited some stats. Justin Herbert saw the most pressures of his career and the most quick pressures. Almost 36% of the pressures he saw were quick pressures, which means they're happening in less than 2 seconds. A lot of that was coming from the interior. So that's part of the reason why, like if you're thinking about DJ Humphreys or Joe Thuney, you want the interior offensive line to be solid in this game. You just talked about how good those guys have been. I would like to see that. Tim Settle's another guy on the interior who like they can really wreck the game from the inside too. This is a 49er style pass rush. They're a platoon. They're going to come in. They're going to keep those guys fresh. They run a lot of TE stunts where the tackle and the defensive tackle on the edge are looping. So it's a cerebral pass rush. They've got to be really disciplined. And Joe Thuney is about as smart of a player as you're going to find on the interior. Him, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, they're all going to need to be on the same page because especially Dwan Taylor and Trey Smith, they've struggled with those TE stunts. I would not be surprised to see that be a point of emphasis on the offensive line this week.
Oh, I agree, 100%. And just one more thing before we get off of Joe Thuney. 25 pressures allowed on the season. Again, insane. Just to put that in comparison, Chris Jones has 74 pressures on the season. Yeah. So he held... If you are playing a third of Chris Jones every single week, you're doing a pretty damn good job on the offensive line. My number 7 is Nico Collins. And he is a guy who I believe is incredibly underrated as a wide receiver. If we're talking top 5, top 10, he's in the conversation. If you leave him out on top 10, I don't think you know ball. If you leave him out of top 5, I'll listen to your argument, but I don't know if I believe you. Fantastic player, 1,006 yards on the season. You remember he was injured for a significant portion, right?
Only played 12 games. They just put him on IR immediately.
Yep. Only 4 drops on the season, 104.2 passer rating when targeted. Those are like Jamar Chase numbers. Those are Justin Jefferson numbers. Do I think he's that level? No, not necessarily. I probably wouldn't take him over Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, but he's right there. And I think a full season of what he's done this year, and we might be having a different conversation where it's him, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase is who's the best wide receiver in the league. Now, that's it. That's all they got. They got Dalton Schultz and they got Joe Mixon. All those other wide receivers he was playing with are gone. But, I mean, he's probably going to get targeted a lot during this game, and he probably deserves it.
Nico Collins is my number 7 as well. And I think the thing that makes Nico Collins so unique is how big he is. He's 6'3", 220, but how dynamic he is at that size. Like he's one of the few guys that's that size that is a legitimate yak weapon. Like you think about some of the best yak receivers in the game, Puka Nacua, Jamar Chase, Rashee Rice. Those guys are all smaller than him. And he just is so explosive for his size. Really special. Maybe, just maybe, a great defensive coordinator like Steve Spagnuolo will be able to figure out to cover a slant, which is something the Chargers just decided, like, what if we just didn't cover the middle of the field? Like, what if we just stopped? Pretty baffling there. But yeah, Nico Collins is a stud. Absolute stud. Just a great example, too, of like, hey, like, let's make sure we have a quarterback in here before we evaluate this guy. Because like Nico Collins was a nobody, and now he's top 10 wide receiver in the game, and the quarterback, right? It's all about the quarterback, and that's what brought him to that level.
Yeah.
Number 6. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. You're good. You're good.
Number 6. This was tough. This was really tough. We've got there's a debate here. Number 6. I have Trent McDuffie. Obviously, All Pro slot last year, second team All Pro this year. I think we've seen what type of player he is year over year, the impact he has, just so sticky in coverage, so technically sound, a absolute force in the screen and run support game. That's something that always impresses me. Also, sneaky good at generating fumbles, really skillful at that. Now, here's the debate. Christian, who do you have at 6?
I have Derek Stingley Jr.
Okay, so here's the debate. Who's the better cornerback? Last year, a lot of people were upset that Stingley was left off for McDuffie. This year, Stingley gets the first team All-Pro nod over McDuffie. It's also worth noting that these are different style of players.
Oh, yes, 100%. And when you were looking pre-draft at Derek Stingley Jr., watching him at LSU, you saw a guy not like Sauce Gardner, but an outside guy who you really feel like could cover anybody on the field. He's incredibly fast, incredibly athletic. And I think this year, I know he got the first team All-Pro. I just can't see him being better than Trent McDuffie. And part of the reason that is because Trent McDuffie is so good in things like the screen game. And Trent McDuffie has not had anybody else to help him out. Lassiter for the Texans has been very, very good.
Also, Lassiter is an all-time, like, whenever we see these players that don't test well at the combine, Kamari Lassiter, he didn't test at the combine because of an injury, but he did a pro day, and his numbers were putrid. Great player. Like, sometimes that stuff just doesn't matter.
Well, from Georgia too, right? And so you think Georgia Bulldog, you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to test through the roof. He's going to be fantastic. Like, no, but maybe he was just a damn good football player and Georgia saw it and kept him on the roster. Like maybe that's just a testament to how good he is. But yeah, put in a situation where he has that clear number 2 to help him out. He's not asked, I think, to do as much as Trent McDuffie has been, but still fantastic player. I mean, like we're splitting hairs here between Trent McDuffie and Derek Stingley Jr. 2 very, very good cornerbacks.
Yeah, I mean, really great cornerback play in this game. Guys taken in the same draft. When you're talking about Stingley, like he's not this stereotypical really long physical, like he's a little bit undersized too. He's almost under 50th percentile in all of his mock draftable categories. It's just that McDuffie's in 9%, right? And like 2% with the arm length. McDuffie, I think in the slot is every bit the player of Stingley. I think Stingley is a better outside player. And, I think I definitely think that should be a goal for the Chiefs this year in the draft. That's why I loved Renardo Green out of Florida State for the Chiefs, because I wanted them to keep McDuffie on the inside. It's worked out well. It's hard to argue with the results, but I think that they are each other's equal if McDuffie's in the slot, especially because that's where he's the most effective in the screen and the flats and all those things that he does really well. My number 5 is Creed Humphrey. I felt disrespectful to put him this low, honestly, because he is the best player at his position. No arguments. It's hard to say that for anyone else in this game other than Patrick Mahomes. However, there are center is important. Obviously, you're touching the ball every play, but and you make the calls. But there are times that he's getting just a hand on one of the guards blockers, right? Like he's helping out. So I just positional value there a little bit. Creed Humphrey's the best player at his position, though, and he's had a great year, especially after getting paid. That's huge. It's something that kind of goes undiscussed sometimes, but guys regress after they get paid. He got paid and had his best year yet. Sky's the limit for him and what he can do. I think he's just kind of getting started with this run of Pro Bowls and All Pros for him, hopefully. But Creed Humphrey, he's the best player on the offensive line for both of these teams, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when you take positional value out of it, and I have him a little bit higher, and you just look, who's uncontested the best player at their position? Patrick Mahomes, probably. Although I think maybe you could make the argument that he didn't have as good of a season as 2 or 3 or 4 other quarterbacks in the league. And you go, okay, well, what about Chris Jones? Oh, he's just been undisputed, the best center in the league. Probably was the best center the last year Jason Kelce played, although it was kind of a toss-up. And he was playing against an NFL legend before he got his big payday. It's like, dude, yeah, I mean, he's a fantastic player. But my number 5, Trent McDuffie, for all the reasons you said, and just a little bit more. 80.6 coverage grade, PFF, that ranked 12th or 3rd among CBs. 51 receptions allowed all season. That's fantastic. I think he also just plays a little bit more. He's just asked to do a little bit more. Plays all over the field, and is just so good. It seems like he's making a fantastic play every other game or every single game. And then now he's getting interceptions, which what was the one thing we talked about throughout this entire season?
Yeah.
It's like one thing. It's like, man, I would maybe rather have Marcus Peters because he gets those interceptions. Like, oh, no, never mind. It's not even close now. Yeah, I'd rather have Trent McDuffie. It's not a question. So we kind of knew those would fall for him. But unlike Derek Stingley Jr., who had, I think he was 6th in pass breakups among all cornerbacks, it's like Trent McDuffie isn't getting tested that much. And when he is getting tested, it's on broken coverage or, a bad play call by the defensive coordinator. It's like there's only so much you can do without being tested as frequently as like Derek Stingley Jr. So McDuffie 5. Who's your number 4?
My number 4 is Derek Stingley. So I just, kind of like flip-flopped him and McDuffie. We kind of already got into that, but great player. Went on the outside, went on the inside. I think he's kind of just now starting to hit his stride in this defense for sure.
So for number 4, I have Danielle Hunter, and I noticed that he was not on your list, and I think I know why. But I think this year, when you look at all that he's done, 13th ranked PFF edge defender, 7th in sacks with 12, 8th in QB hits with 13, 7th in pressures with 66. Like, he's had an outstanding year. I don't know if you can add that little, like, I don't want to say like legacy boost, but like that prove it factor of a defensive player going into the playoffs. Like, Danielle Hunter has been fantastic. And when he played for the Vikings, he had, I think it was a 15 and a half sack season. And it was maybe his 2nd or 3rd year in the league. And that's fantastic. You're a generational pass rusher, except he played like half the season's games the next year, and then half the season's games the next year, and then 2 games the next year. And it's like, can you really put him up this high with those question marks? I just had to, based off this single season, how well he's played and how big of a factor he was in the last game. Like, he was making plays all over the field. And even though it wasn't a statistical, kind of superstar night for him, I saw some things where you go, okay, we're dedicating a lot to Danielle Hunter. Will Anderson's on the other side, right? It's like, yes, we know. Please, dear God, don't Danielle Hunter. Please don't kill our quarterback. So yeah, just had to give him that little bit of a bump, just because I am recognizing maybe what he's done this year.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, he's the type of guy that just wins in that very beautiful pass rush way, bend around the edge and just can beat you off the corner here. And it's been honestly really weird watching him come over to the Texans and then Gernard go over to the Vikings, and both have really good seasons. So it's just kind of like, well, you guys just swap really good pass rushers, but okay. Like I said, I really debated between Anderson and Hunter. I just decided, I think the big difference here with me is I got Travis Kelce, you put Anderson on. Okay, let's speed up here a little bit. So I have Stroud at 3. We already talked about CJ Stroud. I just think he's asked to do a lot. I still have a lot of confidence in him being an elite quarterback here. I do think that this season hasn't been his best. Interested to see how next year goes. And I'm interested to see maybe what he looks like outside of the Shanahan system, where it's kind of like read and throw, and this is where the ball goes. But I still really like what I've seen from CJ Stroud. I think better days are ahead for him.
Yeah, I agree. And I realize I kind of shit on him and put him at my number 9. When you look at all the things that he's dealing with.
Like, you're not wrong. You know that, like, Bryce Young has almost been better than him this year, Yeah,
statistically,
yeah. So, like, we made fun of that guy who, by the way, I would like to take a moment. There's a very famous picture that I am partially responsible for that I do not get credit for. At the 2023 draft, there was a guy standing right across from me in a Panther CJ Stroud jersey. At that time, everyone and their brother knew that they were drafting Bryce Young. And like, I put it on Twitter and I was like, who's going to tell him? Now, there were probably, 20, 30, 40,000 people on the lawn of the World War I Memorial. So I'm sure I'm not the only person who's there, but like, I'm in the pictures that people post of that guy still. I can circle myself like, there I am, because I was right by him. So I would just like to say I was part of history there. But going back to it, like, there's times that like people are just like, this time last year, you were bodying the Panthers for doing that. And like, Bryce Young's almost been better than him. Now there's a whole other part to that of like, hey, Bryce Young hasn't played in a meaningful game in 2 years, whereas like CJ Stroud's playing in the playoffs and just won a playoff game. So he's won 2 playoff games. So let's not put the horse before the carriage here, but you're not wrong. Like there are some reasons to be a little bit more cautious about CJ Stroud now.
Well, yeah, and just to be fair to him, the interior offensive line has been completely decimated. His wide receiver core has been decimated. At some point, you gotta, give him a little bit of credit for surviving this long with all of those handicaps. But anyway, my number 3 is Creed. We've already talked about him. Fantastic player, best at his position. I think that he has incredible value on the field. I think we both do. I just had to give it up to the best guy on the probably positionally wise, playing the best out of all of everybody compared to his competitors. Number 2 for me, Chris Jones. This is a player who I think you could also make the argument is the best player at his position. I think you could even maybe say on the defensive line and count in some of those edge players. In all of the defensive linemen, first in hurries with 53, second in quarterback hits with 15, second in pressures with 74. I'll say it again, 74 pressures on the season. We talked early about why the defensive line wasn't getting home. It damn sure wasn't because Chris Jones wasn't doing his job. Let's go back to Will Anderson, 51 pressures on the season. And he's the 9th or 10th best player in this matchup. Chris Jones, 150% of what he did this year, Chris Jones did. It's outstanding. It's unbelievable. You look at guys and you think, hey, he got his payday. He's not going to show up for the season. He's going to phone it in until the playoffs. Nope. Chris Jones has been the same dominant guy he's always been. And again, best defensive lineman in the league? Maybe. Definitely the best defensive tackle.
Yeah. He's my number 2 as well. He is just a game wrecker and a guy who teams, they wake up, they have to plan around him. And he's a total buoy of the pass rush for the Chiefs. And it's rare to have a talent like him at the interior. He's got a gold jacket waiting for him. There's no doubt about that. And he has a knack, especially lately in the playoffs, for showing up in really big moments. So he's my number 2. And number 1, it's Patrick LeVon Mahomes. But I just think we need to take a moment here and just talk about how special Patrick Mahomes is in the playoffs. We talked about how good he had been in the divisional round. The fact that Patrick Mahomes has lost 3 playoff games his whole career, and they've all been in overtime but one of them, and 2 of them have been to the greatest quarterback of all time. I was arguing with Patriots fans on Twitter, like you do every day. And one of them was talking to me about, because I was looking at a chart that was showing EPA per play in the playoffs by quarterbacks. And Patrick Mahomes, of course, where he always belongs in every graph, is at the top right, which is the best, past Tom Brady. And I said, wow, the same 33 follower accounts that have a Tom Brady profile picture aren't tweeting about this. I wonder why. Well, then they came, of course. And one of them told me, Tom Brady, you're not air adjusting the stats because, you can go into certain places and they'll air adjust the stats. But I bet if you take Tom Brady's last 18 playoff games, they're much closer to Patrick Mahomes' last 18 playoff games. So here we go. Tom Brady's last 19 playoff games. So I took one more because it was just easier with the way the numbers were. He had 35 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 6,055 yards with a 60.5% completion percentage, 86.5 passer rating, 33 rush yards, 1 touchdown. Pretty good for the GOAT. Let's take Patrick Mahomes' last 18. So one less game. 41 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 5,135 passing yards, 67.9% completion percentage, a 105.8 passer rating, 524 rush yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. So he has more touchdowns, less interceptions, less yards, who cares, a better completion percentage, a better passer rating, quadruple the amount of rushing yards and more rushing touchdowns. Mahomes. It's all that matters. And it's so stupid because I feel like a child sometimes, just how much Patrick Mahomes matters. But the Bills and Ravens are about to play a bloodbath of a game. And guess what? They both know. They both know what's waiting on the other side. Mahomes. It's all that matters. And I mean, he's the way, the truth, the light. Amen. Patrick LaVon Mahomes.
A little blasphemous, but I'll let it slide for the GOAT. Dude,
You cannot tell me that he's not an agent of God. He was made he was made in his image. Okay.
I don't know, dude. I've heard some blood magic stuff. There have been some rumors with the devil surrounding Patrick Mahomes for a few weeks now. Oh my God.
The funny memes that people have made of like the satanic worship, and it's like what the Chiefs do at practice every week. Yeah.
Or what happens below.
Hey, look, there's divine intervention happening here one way or the other. And all I got to say, if Patrick Mahomes is wrong, I don't want to be right.
You're damn right.
Okay. Let's get some predictions on this game and let's get out of here. How do you think this game plays out? Give me a score prediction. Just give me your little 3-sentence snippet of how this game plays out.
Okay, I'll break it down as compactly as I can. Kind of scared, but Mahomes 27-20. I think that's the best way you can describe it. Little scared. I'm a little scared about how confident we are, but it's Patrick Mahomes. I'm sure we're going to win the game, and I'm sure it'll be by 1 touchdown. We're not going to blow them out. We never do.
I think the one thing that kept the Texans in the game was the mistakes that the Chargers were doing. I don't think that the Chiefs are going to provide those opportunities. I do not see a way that the Texans move the ball effectively in this game. The one thing that can make this game close or in danger for the Chiefs is going to be if they cannot control the pass rush of the Texans. If that game is getting wrecked like we've seen other games by pass rushers, it could be close. I don't think that happens. I think we get the best version of this team. I think they are healthy and rested. I think that we're going to get quality game plan, focused team, healthy team. I think we're getting Chiefs 28, Texans 17. Okay, so 11-point win, double digits. One of those that maybe the score looks closer than how it actually played out here with kind of some by the ways. Also, just want to shout out special teams. Texans had a punt that they blocked, but somehow it ricocheted off someone and kind of turned into a decent pump when it rolled, and they blocked a kick. So special teams, always a huge part in playoff games. Punt block, kick block, they've got to be on their A game. We've talked about some of the concerns around Harrison Butker, and this is Matt Ariza's first playoff game. Just something to pay attention to. Special teams, they always play a big factor in these games. So, but yeah, we're on to the playoffs here. And tomorrow, you want to join us for the pregame show with Matt Connor, the halftime show with myself, and a hopefully playoff edition post-game celebration with Patrick Allen and Sterling Holmes. What else could you want on a Saturday? Nonetheless, and then just kick back and watch the rest of the games. And like I said, Bills Ravens go into quadruple overtime, the highest scoring game in NFL history. Be my guest. I do not care, because we want them primed for the AFC Championship, and we want you primed for Arrowhead Addict. So make sure you like and subscribe this video. We're trying to get to 55,000 subs on YouTube. Join our premium Discord. And as always, thanks for being great listeners of Arrowhead Addict. Thank you, Christian. Thank you to our excellent producer, Richard. And as always, go Chiefs.